Welcome to Surviving Your Storm podcast, where we explore emotional wellness, forgiveness, self-awareness, and initiative-taking wellness. And now, your host, Sunshine Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Surviving Your Storm podcast. I am your host, Sunshine Johnson, and this is episode number 2. I want to thank each and every one of you out there who has joined the podcast family. Now, recently, I read an article from the Mental Health Center called How Childhood Trauma Affects Us as an Adult. And I want to read you a small excerpt from that article. And it says, according to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, individuals who have experienced abuse are likely to experience stress and anxiety later in life. This long-term stress and anxiety can cause physical symptoms as well as emotional issues throughout life. Ain't that the truth? Now, I've experienced some physical symptoms, but it was the emotional one that took a toll on my life. Now, traumatic stress on a child, it can have either a short-term or a long-term effect. And if it's long-term and you have that attachment to that trauma, then it can follow you into adulthood. And trauma comes from different areas in your life. It could come from a child experiencing the death of a loved one, like a mom or dad or a grandparent or any caregiver or some significant person in their life. It can also come from being bullied in school or witnessing and experiencing domestic abuse in the home. I can align with the latter one because I have witnessed and experienced domestic abuse in my home. Now, I, as promised, will tell you my story. And my story has, I just want to put a little disclaimer out there before I say it, that it has different characters that's attached to the story. So I won't be going too deep into it because I want to respect everybody else that's attached to my story. So my story is going to be a compartment of about three different ways. When you hear it, it's in 3 parts. It's going to be like the first, what happened when I was younger, how it was brought into my adulthood, and what I did to alleviate myself from that emotional stress. So now I will just be explaining to you how I survived my storm. So let's get started. As you already know, I am from the island of Jamaica. And just to say that abuse is not really, well, maybe now, but when I was being brought up in the 1970s, abuse was not a term that we used. It's not something that I heard in school or in the household. You know, parents do beat their children, and it was considered the norm. But it is abuse. And I've learned over the years that what I experienced was a form of abuse in my house. Growing up, I tell myself a long time ago that I started experiencing this abuse before I was even born. Because you see, the abuse was already there. And by the time my mom was pregnant with me, it was already happening to other characters, you know, in the household. So by the time I came out, I was brought into it. I remember a story that my babysitter told me when I was about 12 years old. We had a conversation and she told me that when I was around 5 months old, my dad would come pick me up from the babysitter to take me home. However, I was always fearful of going to him. Whenever she would hand me over to him, I would cry hysterically and she would have to take me back. And that ended up me being with her most of the time for the first 2 years of my life because I was just so fearful of my dad. So for me, I'm thinking back like something bad must have been going on in order for me to fear my own parent. And as times go on, I remember getting beaten all the time for simple things. Once I remember being hit in the eye, and I had bloodshot, red bloodshot in my eye, and I wasn't able to go to school for a little bit. I saw how the abuse towards my mom was really bad, and that affected me just seeing these things, like my father, who I want to love but I can't love because he's behaving this way, beating on someone who I love so much, which was my mom. And I just developed this hatred in my heart from such a very young age, and I wanted him gone. So fast forward, at the age of 15, I migrated to the United States. And luckily for me, I went to New York to live with my family members there. And my father was living here in Florida. But the next year, when I was 16, I was brought to Florida because I was underage and I needed to live with my parents. My mom had moved over from New York to live with my dad. And when I was there, I continued to be beaten by my dad, and I'm 16 years old, but I got the worst beating of my life, where he almost broke my arm and he broke one of the tooth in my mouth, and because he hit me so hard in my face, it was almost like so riveting. But he was fighting me like he was fighting a man, and it was painful. I made the decision that time that I am not going to stay in this household and be abused like this anymore. So I came back to New York and I went to live with my sister, and from there things was just perfectly fine. Everything was good. I moved into my adulthood. I did everything what everybody said that we should do: get married, have kids, go to school, get a degree, get a great job. I did it all. But in doing all of that, at the age of 38, I hit what is called a midlife crisis. I thought that's something that's supposed to happen when you're 50, but here I am at 38 years old, and I was just the most unhappy human being in the face of this world, even though I had a loving husband and beautiful children, and life was supposed to be good for me, but it wasn't. So by the time I was 39 years old, I gave God an ultimatum. And I said to him, Father, if you do not change my life by the time I am 40, I'm giving you 365 days. And if you don't change my life, I am going to give it back to you. And I was serious about that. I just hated everything that was going on. But by the time I was 40, I had transferred, go through a transformation. And it wasn't like things had gotten better in the home. It wasn't, my husband and I were about to get divorced. My children and I, they were teenagers, and I just didn't have a good grip on handling teenagers at that time. So things was just not even that great in the home. But what had transformed for me is that my heart was changed, and my relationship with God has grown so much that he really heard me when I said I'm going to give up my life, and he came into my life and decided to start teaching me his ways, and I started doing things his way. And by the time I was 40 years old, I'm here today. So I did not give my life back to him, and I'm very grateful that I'm here. But during the year of me being 40, I knew something had to change. And God started telling me that why I am experiencing so much havoc in my life, it stemmed from the abuse that happened when I was a child, that I did not let it go, that I'm still having hatred in my heart, and that I need to let it go. And at first it was very hard because I didn't want to let go of the hatred I had for my dad, because I thought that he was the most wickedest person in the whole world, and I didn't want nothing to do with him. But I felt the change in my heart, and God says that you really need to forgive him and let it go. I didn't know what to do because he had banned me from his house and I couldn't go there. And I couldn't call him on the phone because he wouldn't accept any phone call from me. So I didn't know what to do. I called a girlfriend and I explained to her what I was going through, and she so beautifully said to me that I should just write him a letter. Genius. So that's what I did. It took me a while, but one day in December of 2014, I wrote that letter. And I thought I was going to write all this thing, you did this to me, but I forgive you. But what came out of that letter was very short. I wish I kept a copy of it. It was very short. It was simple. It was, I thank you for all the things that you have done for me in life, because I had gotten to know his story by this and know that he went through a hard time when he was a child, and therefore did not have the skills and the tools and the technique in rearing a family. So he lashed out. And I found this out and I started to identify with his behavior. And so I thank him. I thank him because he pushed us hard to make sure that we go to school and make sure that we don't have a lot of friends and get entangled into anything that was negative. He really was that great father that I couldn't see at that time. And so I thanked him for the great provider that he was. And I asked for forgiveness for what I have done, because when I was an adult, I was arguing and fussing with him. I even hit him once before at the age of 29. And let me tell you something. It doesn't matter what your parents have done to you. You never put your hands on them. Because that's one of my greatest regrets on earth, is even though I wanted to, because I think he had it coming, for touching me at 29, you don't do that, because I'm an adult, but I should not have touched him back. And I had to ask for forgiveness for that, and I told him that I forgave him for all the things that had happened. That was it. It was simple, it was short, it wasn't nothing long. It wasn't, you did this and you shouldn't have done that. It wasn't like that. It was just simple, short. I mailed it and I was over it. I felt, the moment I put it in the mailbox, I was good. I was like, okay, Father, thank you so much for coming into my life and showing me what was the problem and how I can fix it. And I forgave my dad. Now, when I forgave him, 5 months had passed. I didn't hear anything from anyone. And because I haven't seen them or heard anything from them in 10 years, even though I live 50 minutes away from my parents, I got a phone call from my mom, and she said, sit down. Now, my dad was sick like 7 months before. My sibling told me he was sick and I should go look for him, but I didn't. And now I'm thinking she's going to tell me that he has passed away. So I was very weak and shaky, and she said, sit down. And then she said to me, your father said that you and your family can come and look for him. And I was ecstatic. I was like, what? Because I've been dreaming about that ever since I mailed the letter. Like, I want a father-daughter relationship with him. I went to look for him in the hospital the very next day, which was his 77th birthday. And it was the most beautiful reunion. We hugged, we cried, we held on to each other for like a whole hour. He was weak. He could barely talk. His voice was so soft. But I was just so happy just to be beside this man that I hated so much and wanted to hurt. We were with him for a little bit. We celebrated his birthday with him, and then we had to leave because he had gotten so weak. And the nurses said, you all have to go. So we left, and I thought when I was leaving that was the last time that I would ever see him. And I told God that it was okay, that he could let him go. It's okay. But that didn't happen. Even though the hospital was telling me he only has 6 months to live and we should put him in hospice, I said, no, we're not going to do that. I need that time with him. And when he left the hospital, he gave me 2 good years. 2 great years that we were able to get together and be father and daughter. And in 2017, unfortunately, he got sick again and he went back in the hospital, and he's no longer with us. But I am so grateful that I forgave him. So The moral of the story is, yes, things can happen to us when we are a child growing up. But we don't have to live the rest of our life until we're 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and go to grave with that in our heart. We can forgive. So I just want to give 3 tips on, and what you can do if something is bothering you, if you're feeling like down and out in your life, and you know that something that happened to you is the reason that's causing that. The first thing I want to say is talk to God. Talk to God about it. That was what got me through. He was the one that told me that I needed to let go of the baggage, the shackle that was on my feet, and let it go so that I can become what I want to become in life. And I'm so grateful that we had that conversation, and even though I went to have midlife crisis at 38, if I didn't give God that ultimatum, then I probably wouldn't have found him as strong as I did. That helped me to build back my life up to what it is today. So talk to God about it. Okay, you can have that vertical relationship with him. The second thing is to find out, if you can, find out what the other person's story is. I found out that my dad was abused, when he was a child. His parents didn't really care much for him as they should have. And so he didn't get to learn the skills that he needed to bring into his family when he started created one. And therefore, we were the subject of his upbringing. And I cannot blame him for that. He just didn't know any better. He just didn't know what to do and to show love like, a young child like myself and, needed from him. He just didn't know how to do it. And the third one, so that is, before I get into the third one, so that is the main reason why you should take the time out to find out, ask questions. I had to ask my mom, my sister, different people questions of what happened, to my father that made him the way he was. So go find the source who can support you on what happened, what really happened to that person before. And the last one is forgiveness. You want to forgive. Forgive the person that hurt you. Forgive the person that created harm to you, produced shame and guilt in your life. You want to forgive them, because forgiveness is never about the other person. It's always about you. And I know you know this. Forgiveness is for you. It's not for me. It is not for the other person, is what I meant to say. It is always about you. It's you starting your healing. It is you letting go of something that hurt. Not to say that what they did was fine and that you're saying, oh, it's okay. No, you're not saying that. It's just that you're no longer taking that poison and hoping for that person to die. Because normally they're not even thinking about you. They move on with their life. My dad, I don't think he ever thought that he abused us. I don't think that was a question for him. So those are my 3 tips. You want to talk to God about the situation. You want to find out what the other person's story is. That's very important. And you want to go ahead and forgive. Childhood trauma doesn't have to, you don't have to take it till you die. It doesn't have to go until you're 80, 90 years old and you're still forgiving someone. Even if you get to bedridden and you're dying and you want to forgive that person while you're dying, it's okay. That's still good too. But don't you want to live your life? Live now, in the present. So forgive and live a beautiful life. Like my life is happy. I've been on a journey of finding who I was as a person. And I had to forgive the little girl, the hurt little girl that was inside of me. I had to forgive her. I wrote her a letter of 14 pages long. And I forgave her. And now I get to step into the woman that I am today. So that's my story. And I just want to say thank you guys for coming again and listening to me. You can find my podcast on Spotify and all the other podcast platforms. And don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to follow me here on YouTube and also on the podcast platform. And thank you so much again for coming. And I hope you are taking away something from my experience that can help you in your life going forward. I'll see you next week.